Love everything about it except for the fact that we've got a little oil leak down here on the bottom of the engine. So well, I've had this bike for a year and a half, put thousands and thousands of miles on it, so I figured what the heck, it's time for a 790 Adventure R review. Thanks for stopping by the channel this week, and if you're new here, please take a moment, subscribe and hit that notification bell. We would really appreciate it. So I picked up my 790 Adventure R in May of 2019, and like a lot of people, I had placed a deposit the previous November, so this thing was long awaited, highly anticipated, limited quantities, you name it. I just wanted to get my hands on it and ride it, and I was stoked when I finally did, though this bike has not been flawless. So I want to talk about some of the issues I've had with it and some of the issues other people have had with theirs, but also I want to talk about the upside. What do I love about this bike? So let's get into it. The first thing I want to touch on is the low center of gravity, because I don't think this gets talked about enough. But look, if you've ridden any other adventure bike, 1090, 1290, any of the Beamers, even the Tenere, you'll notice that they feel a little bit top heavy, and there's no denying that. But KTM's focused effort on centralizing weight and mass and fuel lower in the chassis really paid off, and this bike handles supremely well, considering that it is a large adventure bike. And of course, helping to complement that low center of gravity is the KTM WP suspension. Now up front, you've got the 48mm fork, which is the largest diameter fork you can get on an adventure bike. That'll help improve rigidity. Got a PDS shock in the rear. Overall, 9.5 inches of travel, complete tunability, high speed, low speed, rebound, you name it, it's all there. And then no linkage on the rear, so you get a little bit better ground clearance. And of course, you don't have to grease the linkage, so there's less maintenance. Regarding the ergonomics, the bike fits me really well. I'm 6 foot tall. I've got a 30-inch inseam. I haven't adjusted the bars and the clamps at all. I'm really happy with the ride height and the seat height, but I also realize that will not be the case for everybody. So if you are a taller rider, you've got a few options. Obviously, you can add the taller seat or taller seat foam. I believe that Seat Concepts sells a complete taller seat. If that is the case, I'll leave a link to the description to that seat below. Also, you can move the bars around in the stock triple clamp. Obviously, you can buy taller bars and things like that, or you can even add risers, which I would not recommend. But the stock triple clamp does allow you to move the bars into 5 or 6 different positions. Shorter riders have a few more options. The complete lower seat would help out a ton. You could also lower the suspension. Just be mindful of the fact that if you do that, you're going to lose some of that 9.5 inches of suspension travel. And I think under those circumstances, if you're going to go to those lengths just to ride a 790, perhaps the standard adventure model is better for you, because it is in fact about 2 inches lower than the R model. So here's my assessment of the engine. Without a doubt, this is the raciest adventure bike out there in terms of performance ever made. Definitely the raciest adventure bike out there. That being said, with the use of all the electronic rider aids, you can fine-tune this beast to your liking. So that's a huge plus. If you're wondering if this thing is as good on the pavement as a 1090 or a 1290, for instance, I'm here to assure you that yes, it'll cruise right along with those bikes on the slab, and at the same time, it's going to perform better off-road and be easier to ride off-road. My only real complaint about the 790 in respect to the engine is the intake, if you even want to attribute that to the engine, but I just think that's a super poor design. I know there are aftermarket solutions for it, but I'm just not a fan of it. Let's talk about the brakes here for a minute now. I've grown accustomed to superior braking systems from KTM over the years, and I expected the same out of my 790. That being said, not everything has been roses with the braking systems, specifically the rear system, which was recalled 8-10 months after the release of the first 790s in the US, and I was most definitely impacted by that. I wasn't just inconvenienced because I couldn't ride my bike, but I was actually on my bike when my brake system failed and I was descending from a pass on the Idaho BDR, And truth be told, I nearly ran off the road, and I don't know if I would have got hurt bad. I don't know if I would have been killed, but I know it was steep, and I know I was fortunate enough to get the bike slowed down to where I barely made a turn and rode on. Which of course brings me to the front braking system, which I have nothing but praise for. Reason being, I had another 7 days worth of riding left in Idaho, Montana, and Oregon to complete that tour, and I didn't get off the bike. I kept riding it. I just used the front brake, and I think overall the braking system on the front is awesome. Going back to the rear, I've ridden the bike again on trails quite a bit. I'm not impressed with the power of the rear, whether the ABS is on, off, it doesn't matter. Overall, I think they need to do something to beef up that rear system. Last little thing here on braking, and more specifically, I just want to talk about the ABS as it pertains to being an electronic rider aid. Obviously, there's been a lot of grief and heartache over the fact that if you kick the bike into off-road ABS or shut ABS off altogether, when you stop and then go to resume a ride, it automatically defaults back to on-pavement ABS, which, yeah, I'll admit that is kind of frustrating, but it's not a deal breaker for me. I have to ask myself when I'm on an adventure ride, how big of a hurry am I in? It takes 1 to 2 seconds to kick it back into the preferred ABS setting, the one that you're looking for. So not a big deal to me, but I also would expect to be able to lock in my most favorite settings, and that just isn't the case. So that's pretty much a wrap on my overview of the bike. Now I want to talk about some things that I don't like about it, some things that I've had issues with or other people have had issues with, or just some things that you should keep an eye on or potentially upgrade if you are to pick up a 790 or even an 890 in the future. My experience with the bike has been pretty good. I feel like I've been fairly fortunate. I've had a leaky countershaft seal. I've had a leaky radiator hose, which I was able to fix thanks to another YouTube video. And I've had the rear brake recall. Other than that, the bike for me has been absolutely flawless. But I have seen some other issues, and I manage a large private Facebook group for 790s and 890s. So I've seen a lot of this stuff play out over the past year or two. Obviously, you want to keep an eye out for any leaks. I haven't seen any engine or case leaks or anything like that from anybody, but most of us have experienced a countershaft leak. I don't know if that's been rectified on the newer models or not, but it doesn't seem to be as much of an issue moving forward. And again, make sure that all your clamps on your radiator hoses are tight. Also, keep an eye on your shock body. There have been reports of the exhaust getting the shock body too hot, and then you have an issue with that, a failure with that. I believe there is an aftermarket company, Camel, ADV or something like that, that makes a shield for that. I've never had the issue. I don't run the shield, but it's something to be mindful of. Another area you might want to keep an eye on is that area where your fairing or your tower attaches to the steering head. I've seen issues where these have cracked and broken off. Personally, I just make sure that the bolts are torqued to spec, and I have not had an issue with it, but it does appear to be a vulnerable spot, and again, I believe there is an aftermarket brace that can help remedy that situation. Let's talk about a couple things that I just don't like about the bike. Number one, the buffeting from the windscreen. Now, if you ride in an aggressive street position and really tuck in when you're on the road, the air will go right over the top of you. It won't be an issue. But if you're just riding in an upright position, you will get a lot of wind in your face, and it is kind of annoying. Obviously, you can buy extensions for the windscreen or buy aftermarket windscreens to help with that, but again, the buffeting is not great on this machine. Next complaint for me is the cable clutch. Now look, KTM, you've kind of staked a claim on putting hydraulic clutches on all of your off-road, your motocross, and your dual sport bikes. So what's the deal? Why don't we have one on the 790? Now I hear where you're coming from. You say this bike's going to be ridden in remote places and reliability is a factor. It's an important key, but I could say the same thing about the KTM 500, which is ridden all around the world and in some remote, dark places. I've never personally had a hydraulic clutch failure with the KTM, so it would just be nice to have the hydraulic clutch. That being said, the cable clutch is fine. It's adequate. The wheels, a lot of people talk about the wheels because they're wider than a typical off-road wheel that you'd see on a KTM 500, for instance. In fact, if you buy the rally version of this bike or the rally version of the 890, it does indeed come with a narrower wheel, which is theoretically stronger. However, I've had pretty good luck with these wider wheels, and I think for those who think they need the stronger wheels, you need to ask yourself, what did you buy this bike for? What is your line selection like? And are you just willing to pound through stuff and tear your bike up? If that's the case, it doesn't matter what kind of wheels you're going to run. You're going to ultimately thrash your stuff. Some people are really high on the tubeless system. I would say, hey, that's not really for me. Reason being, if you do dent your rim, guess what? You're sliding a tube in anyway. And I've been running Bridgestone Ultra Heavy-Duty tubes, link below in the description. I've been running those for 14,000 miles, no flats, and the offset valve stem hole on the rear, not an issue for me. I've had no flats. Last thing here from me, let's just talk about the skid plate real quick. I was actually surprised that KTM included a skid plate on this machine, because with their off-road and their dual sport models, they very rarely have skid plates on them unless they are a special edition. That being said, the stock skid plate has received a lot of criticism. Some people say it's paper thin, it's not going to protect anything, so on and so forth. And in fact, I bought an aftermarket skid plate, an Enduro Engineering one. It's super beefy, but I've never put it on. And I've been fine, 14,000 miles. You can look at the underside of my skid plate. Now, I know the haters are going to say I don't ride fast, I don't ride hard, I don't ride technical stuff, I don't ride trails. Yeah, whatever, you can say that. Come ride with me anytime. Truth be told, there's something to be said for skill, technique, and line selection. So I think that's just about going to wrap up my review of the KTM 790 Adventure R. As an overall assessment on my end, I would tell you could go to the showroom, pick this bike up, and it would be adventure ready. No matter what other people say, choose the tires that you prefer. Do you want to run tubeless or tubes? Maybe beef up the skid plate, maybe swap out the mirrors or do something like that. But truth be told, you can pretty much ride this thing anywhere in the world in stock trim, and it's going to serve you well. That being said, the bike, again, hasn't been without issues. Like most bikes, you've got to kind of wade through that. I'll say this, if I had to buy the bike all over again and experience the same issues I had, would I do it again? You bet. In fact, I'm even considering the new 890. I really love the bike. I think it's the best adventure bike out there, but you've got to kind of weigh that up against your style of riding. I'm a more aggressive rider. I like to cover lots of ground and kind of push my limits to an extent off-road. That makes the bike good for me. That doesn't necessarily make it good for you, but still, I think you could tailor this thing to your liking no matter what. And if you're just out looking to do BDR type rides all the time, I just don't think there's any other bike that compares. Viewers, once again, thanks for stopping by the channel. I really appreciate your support. We cleared 300 subscribers in really short time. Again, thank you for the support. I'll be back next week. In the interim, keep it on two wheels. And if you appreciated this video, please give it a thumbs up. Drop us a comment in the description. I'll do my best to get back to everybody. Take care.